Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, a bunch of entitled corrupt officials seized my property while I was gone. They stole my house and my land and thought they could get away with it. They even destroyed my home to get back at me, and I honestly could not be more upset. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the story. So I had the unfortunate luck of being a business rival with a city official. To make things worse, he was corrupt and things being illegal did not seem to bother him or stand in his way of doing anything he wanted. Because of the nature of this story, I need to give a little bit of background about where I live geographically. So I live in the Central African Republic and I own properties not too far away from the capital city of Bangui. People here can be split up into categories, and I fall into a category of people that are seen as outsiders because my tribe did not originate from the area. It's really a stupid thing, and I don't want to waste time with a history and political lesson in the middle of the story. All you need to know is that this city official is strong on believing that I am an outsider and I should not own and run businesses in the area, and he should have my properties instead. I purchased a few lots of land that had been torn down and was planning on building a mixture of business buildings for rent and also apartments in a lot that was a more residential living area. However, before I could do any of this, I had some business to attend to overseas and I left thinking that everything would be there when I get back. This was not a quick trip and I was gone for a while. And by the way, I had to censor some info there because OP was revealing quite a bit of himself and I wouldn't really want to put that on the internet. But anyway, what I found was that buildings had been put up while I was gone, and I was not the one to do this. A couple of them even had people renting, and I had to figure out what was going on. I knew that my rival had something to do with this, and I was already getting ready to have a lawyer look into things. It would be simple enough to see who got the building permits and illegally did it. Before any of that though, I got sidetracked by another problem that got me even angrier. While I was gone, my house had been torn down and my stuff was either gone or part of the rubble. And to make this very clear, I owned this land my house was built on, so it being clearly torn down just would not normally happen. That plus my lots being built on were clearly connected, or it would have been the biggest coincidence ever. So I had a long phone call with my lawyer who promised to work as fast as possible to see what happened. Luckily for you guys, no wait is needed and you can get the answer right away. I was right that it was my rival, and it turns out he used his position as a city official to make this all happen. I said before that he was corrupt, and that extends to paying people off and being friends with other corrupt people in the government. He somehow got my home seized by paying people off and then tearing it down legally. I put that in quotes because on paper it was legal, but it made no sense for my house to be seized. My properties were a similar story, and I saw that he got the land claimed for the government and taken away from me. Even though it was clear the land was being used to build businesses and high-end hotels that would get him a ton of money. There was no other choice for me but to sue him, but it was a little more complicated than that. He was in a position of power and had other corrupt people in the government backing him up. For all I knew, he would be able to pay off the courts to find in his favor, and I would be totally out of luck. I ended up suing him separately for each property that he illegally seized. If I tried to group my house with the lots and it went south, it could end badly for me. My house property was the easiest thing that I was able to get back from him, and as you can imagine, it's one of the more important ones for me. The lots I sued him separately for were gonna be a little bit more complex. We went to court and he was explaining how my home was seized for lack of payment, and since I could not be contacted, the house was torn down to then be resold. He had official government papers and all of that, so it looked really good for him. The only thing was that I could just easily prove that my payments, as well as the fact that I could be contacted while I was away. So I was able to get my land back and a portion of money for the house that wouldn't come close to the cost to rebuild. The thing is now that I have him being looked at a little closer, and also his friend in the housing sector that filed the paperwork falsely. For the lots, it was a little bit more complicated because it was marked as the government seizing it. This can happen for certain things, but this was not one of those cases. They were showing paperwork that the land they took was historical or something, and that me building on it would cause a huge incident and be illegal. Plus paperwork stating the land is protected and that I was given money to compensate for the loss. Which of course I never got because everything they said was a complete lie. I allowed the court to go through my bank account records and see that I never got any money from them for the plots of land. Plus the obvious fact that the corrupt official was building his own things on the land and getting money for it. Not the government getting money, mind you, but the official personally. These lawsuits were enough for him to get looked into deeply, along with everybody else that had a name signed on these illegal papers. I got my lots back, but that really was not enough for me anymore. I wanted him to pay for what he did, and other people going down with him was just a bonus. As long as the people looking into him were not going to be corrupt, I knew they would find plenty to bring him down. Him and about 5 other government workers got looked into, and they were all found to have been giving bribes and payouts for people to look the other way. They stole property, money, and even cars. Not to mention the dozens of people that were guilty of accepting the bribe and knowingly helped commit fraud. It never went up high enough that it got to people in the big government, but it was still enough for the people in the city to pay attention. All of these people ended up losing their positions and going to jail for bribery and fraud. The only positive thing I can say is that at least some of the construction and selling got done for me. Since I owned the properties, again I got all the profit, but I was not gonna have to pay him a penny for the money he spent on development. All the more I had saved to rebuild my house, since at that point I still did not have one anymore. I hope that he rots and loses more business to people like me that he thinks don't belong in this country. Now, with my properties back in my possession, I saw an opportunity to turn this around and make a profit from the buildings that my rival had built on my land. I had the buildings evaluated and discovered that they were top-notch quality and well built. So I decided to rent them out. The demand for rental properties in the area was high, and I was able to attract a large number of tenants with the high-end buildings. I also discovered that my rival had made a fortune from the illegal construction of these buildings, and I was determined to make sure that the profits were returned to the right people. So I took the profits and invested in improving the surrounding area and creating new job opportunities for the less unfortunate. With my newfound wealth, I also decided to help the less fortunate in the community. I started a charity to help those in need, providing food and shelter to those who needed it. The charity was well received, and it helped to improve my reputation in the community. In the end, I was able to turn a negative situation into a positive one. My rival and his accomplices were behind bars, and my properties were back in my possession, and I was making a profit from them. I had also helped to improve the community. What more could you want? And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I am very happy for the positive turnout in this story in the end. It was kind of unexpected, to be honest, because I thought that this corrupt city official would come after OP and try to kill him or something. But thankfully, that's not what happened. The next one is a malicious compliance XXL story. I'd been separated from my ex for 3 grueling months, and the only thing that seemed to come out of our discussions were her constant demands. Despite my best efforts to settle the divorce amicably, my ex seemed determined to make it as difficult as possible. I, being well versed in legal documents, knew that a fair settlement was crucial to avoid paying exorbitant amounts in alimony. But every proposal I made was met with resistance and objections. My ex seemed unwilling to take any responsibility and would avoid answering any direct questions about what terms she would accept. I soon realized that a paper trail was necessary, so all communications shifted to email. Despite the ongoing stress, I was determined to do the right thing and continued to provide financial support, and even though I had moved my direct deposit to a separate account. My final offer was a desperate attempt to reach a compromise. I then offered to take on all the debt, including her student loans, provide her with a monthly sum for a year to get back on her feet, and even give her all the possessions. In return, I would just keep my car, my dog, some tools and some clothes. However, it was all for nothing, as my ex deemed it not good enough. It became clear that my ex was more interested in playing the victim and taking advantage of the situation rather than finding a resolution. The whole ordeal was taking a toll on me both emotionally and financially, but I was determined to see it through. And so we get to the meat of the story for the malicious compliance. 3 months in, I finally get her to agree to a mediator since I'm getting nowhere. She shows up to the initial meeting, the first time we have seen each other in a while, the second time since splitting. She was staying with her sister. The mediator starts out with the rules of the mediation and the agreements to sign. I sign easily, she balks but signs it finally. One of the relevant terms is that we agree to not file any other legal paperwork, we would come to an agreement and the mediator would file the final court papers on both of our behalves to get the divorce ordered. The mediator starts asking basic questions, and every question to either of us results in my ex launching into an irrelevant topic attempting emotional manipulation of me or him. I quickly resolve to grey rock her directly and only direct my interactions to the mediator. I do my best to ignore her off-topic ramblings and reply to the mediator when she briefly crossed relevancy, like someone falling from a tree and briefly being stopped by various branches on the way down. The peak was when she literally crawled on top of the big table to stick her face in mine to force me to see her and engage in her ranting. The mediator called it quits at that point. He reminded her of the rules she agreed to, gave us homework to fill out, and had us schedule the next meeting with his clerk 2 weeks out. 3 days later, I get served with a summons to court for a hearing over spousal support. The summons shows the claim my ex made that all I had received from her in 3 months was $130. Oh my god. This was not true at all, not to mention in violation of the mediator terms. So I end up on a conference call with the ex and the mediator as he tells her that she needs to withdraw the complaint or mediation cannot continue. She adamantly insists that she knows her rights. So the mediator ends his involvement, cuts us refund checks minus time worked so far, and exits the stage left. I then prepared for the hearing. I printed out 3 months of bank statements and highlighted every transfer to her, every bill paid on her behalf, every ATM withdrawn by her card, over 100 toll bills I received from her just driving through express lane tolls, so I got the elevated license plate fee mailed to me. $13,000 and change. You missed a couple of zeros in your complaint, I thought. My final stack of paper was rather thick, so I made and printed an Excel spreadsheet summary for the cover sheet. I also looked up the spousal support rules again. It's 40% of the difference between the income goes from the higher paid to the lower paid. Some little wiggle room, but that's it. Just simple. She was currently getting up to 72% of my pay once you factored her bills in. This court hearing was a good thing. Not as good as a mediator and fast resolution, but I was not likely to end up getting even more screwed here. Not to mention I had some daydreams of her finding out what lying on court documents might do. So the court date rolls around, I show up to court, waiting in the hall outside the family law section. She then shows up and plops herself next to me to start going off on me again. I try to ignore her. Then, to keep from engaging, I start a written transcript of her ranting using the back cover of my paperwork folder. Finally, she realized what I'm doing and ends the ranting with, "Oh, I guess you're writing what I'm saying so you can make your friends hate me." They needed no encouragement, by the way. She huffs a few seats away and is quiet the rest of the time we waited. The court officer, not a judge, just someone authorized to handle it since it's a simple and clear legal process, finally comes to us and we head in. The officer starts the legal speeches, yada yada, and then asks my ex if she has anything to add to the complaint. She launches into a roller coaster speech proclaiming all my bad faults, some of which were real, how mean I was to try to divorce her, and how I obviously didn't need any of the money I made because he's just gonna live somewhere simple and cheap anyway. Yeah, her words. The court officer returns to the present like someone climbing down from the kitchen table after seeing a rat run by, and she asks me if I have anything else I would like to say. She can see the stack of paper and eyeballs it as she is talking. I hand over the stack and tell the officer that the summary sheet on top should help clear up the financial points in question and just verbally start going through the items. At each one, my ex interrupts to give a reason why that item should not count. Every single one. Absolutely insane. The officer keeps asking her to stop interrupting, but to no avail. We finally finish the list. The officer is shaking her head slightly and says, "Mr. Yen, this court process is to ensure that both parties are doing the right thing, so all of the," and gestures to encompass the stack of paper, "needs to stop right now. We'll garnish your paychecks for the amount specified by law and send that to her instead." I know it's a win. I know it was going to be, but she didn't. She sat there all smug as we get into the calculations. I asked for a couple of adjustments to keep the amount of her car payment since I co-signed and I wanted to be sure the bill was paid. I expected that she would refuse or overspend on other stuff and be unable to pay it. I did not want to give her the power to trash my credit. The officer agreed. I then asked to keep the insurance payment amount too, for much the same reason. Also agreed by the officer. My ex continued to be smug though. I know she was thrilled at the idea of getting a court check directly. It sure would show me. Everything wrapped up, we got the total, signed papers, I handed over a check for the first payment, and the officer got up to make copies of everything. I asked the officer if I could wait in another room while she did, and got an agreement with a bit of side eye at my ex. I got my paperwork first, with the officer saying it might take a few minutes for her to get the paperwork, but you are free to go. I got the hint and left immediately. I'd parked a few streets away anyway, another barrier if she couldn't park near me. I got in my car and immediately called my cell carrier and cancelled her phone. Does she want to set up her own plan? I cannot answer that. I'm obeying a court order to remove her from my accounts. Okay, and work down the remaining subscriptions I was paying for that she used. I even had the bills in front of me from court with account numbers and customer service numbers right there. I was done and driving home when she started blowing up my phone with incoming emails demanding to know what I was doing. And then texts from her sister's phone and then calls. I just grinned and did not answer any of them. She stopped after an hour or so and gave me a few hours of silence. Then an all-caps email with a screenshot of the Netflix inactive account message saying, "Oh my god, even Netflix!" I admit I giggled. The fallout was not over though. A month later, after she realized how much less she has from me after winning her case, she files an appeal. It is denied due to a lack of reason. A month later, she files a complaint that I was not paying her car payment. Just an excuse to get into court. I'd been paying it and I was also pretty confident that even if I hadn't, she didn't know how to get into that loan's account. She legally could, just never had cared to learn how. I had a lawyer at this point and we both went to court. She is going to join by phone. The officer paused before calling and tells my lawyer, "This lady is a piece of work." The validation of that statement will always remain with me. The call goes predictably. My ex makes irrelevant rants. The officer keeps shutting her down, finally asks my ex for proof that I was not paying the car payment, as she is holding statements and check images proving I had. My ex nearly screams, "I just know he isn't, so he can hurt me." The officer replies, "I'm holding proof that he has paid it and it's satisfying his legal obligation." The complaint is then dismissed. "Thank you," and hangs up on my ex. The divorce took another 10 more months, lots more crazy, teaches her newbie lawyer a hard lesson, and I walked away with even less alimony than the spousal support and only about 60% of the debt. Sadly, I lost my dogs to her though, my only regret in the outcome. One is certainly past old age limits now and the other is in that range. I still miss them. And then a user in the comments said, a friend had the same thing but opposite genders. The shouty husband left her abruptly when she did not apologize to him, which was the usual routine, after he started an argument about something or other. I'm not sure how the finances worked out, but I know they still each owned half the house for a long time. Both worked, no dependent children, no violence involved. Also both in middle age, 4 years on, she has blossomed. Small steps at first, learning to be happy by herself. Later a boyfriend, now fiancé, her own age, entered the picture. She often said that redirecting her life after that marriage was like eating a dinosaur. Just one bite at a time and keep going. She said the other day that the last of the pickled dinosaur is nearly gone. The ex, as I understand it, is living alone and becoming ever more isolated and bitter. Shouty is not a very marketable quality for men in late middle age, apparently. The next one is titled, Never Think You Are Superior. Disclaimer, this takes place in Germany. I, female 32, had a very strange group of friends in high school. The "if you have friends like this, you don't need enemies" kind. One of these girls was Julia, fake name. She treated me horribly, but in the same breath would call me her best friend without letting me really have a say in the matter. She would rip me to shreds behind my back, make up rumors about me, etc. It was a very confusing time, and so our clique stuck together through years of secretly creating drama and disliking each other. In hindsight, all dumb 14-year-old high school girly stuff, but at the time it truly hurt me a lot. Julia had to repeat a grade and changed schools, and I cut the friendship off right there. She still had friends at my school though, and so the rumors continued for years. Even up to my mid-20s I would hear from people, "Oh, weren't you the girl who slept with XYZ?" Even though I was the most boring, introverted high schooler ever. I learned to shrug it off, but knowing so many people had an awful misconception of me because of Julia was disheartening and anxiety-inducing. There was a good chance people my age had heard of me even if they had never met me. This weekend I was back in my hometown and attended an event with some friends, none of which I went to high school with. We were standing at a table drinking wine and enjoying the sun when one of my friends pointed out that a neighboring table kept looking at me. I looked and it was Julia and a bunch of other women quickly turning their heads away. They had been looking me up and down and clearly gossiping. Now, I am not currently in my best phase. I have gained some weight, I was dressed cute but sloppily and was disheveled and sweaty. I felt self-conscious and obviously this was not how I wanted to meet a person, but I had so much bad history with. But I am not that boring introverted high schooler anymore. Nowadays I am outspoken, opinionated and a little bit mischievous when the occasion arises. So I decided it was time to stretch my acting muscles and be petty for once. I went over, all question marks and polite smiles being like, "Hey, I saw you looking, can I help you with anything?" I did not say that sarcastically, I was genuinely just being polite. The woman looked surprised and then one of them pointed at Julia and said, "Oh no, Julia here just said you used to go to the same school." I looked Julia right in her face and said super excitedly, "Oh really? The Montessori school?" Which was my grade school. Julia looked really put off, her face was super scrunched up and she replied confused, "No, our high school's name." Listen, I'm not an actress, but I know I pulled this off perfectly. I made a surprised and then pensive face and said, "Oh, and your name is?" I could tell Julia was getting irritated. She said her name and I thought for a second and then apologized and said, "Oh my goodness, this is so embarrassing. I really cannot place you. How long were we in class together?" Until 8th grade. She looked so uncomfortable while saying that. She was looking at my face like she clearly wanted to say more, but could not tell if I really did not remember her. It was glorious. I was acting my butt off, sort of smiling apologetically and saying, "Boy, I'm so sorry, that was nearly 17 years ago. But please don't take it personally. I really only remember the names of the people I was friends with back then." The other women were all sort of chuckling uncomfortably and one of her friends even said, "Oh yeah, that happens to me all the time too. I can never place former classmates." We were just laughing a little and then Julia just threw in a really meek, "We were friends." I wanted to laugh at her at that point, but I kept it in and just sort of shrugged and said, "I'm so sorry, I really don't recall, but hey, it was nice seeing you again. I hope you ladies have a nice rest of the evening." The look on her face when I turned away was priceless. I will dream about it for years. I could tell her other friends did not really think much about the whole interaction, but Julia was clearly embarrassed. So I made sure to wink at her when she passed me to leave the event. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching and please don't forget to check out my playlists for more awesome videos. Also, if you haven't already, I would very much appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to not miss any videos. Thank you so much, I will see you again tomorrow.